let's just change the subject for a second, because one of the topics that keeps getting brought up, and Darrell MVP snuck his way into our live chat Sunday night and said,
Well, you can.
Ohio State's loss to Oregon really hurts Iowa. I think it's probably would have been better if Ohio State had won. Now, it certainly would have been better if USC had not blown that lead against Penn State. That would have helped. But the bottom line is, the way I look at that, Mark, is you had two unbeatens in Oregon and Ohio State. One of them lost this weekend. One of them won. There was no way around that scenario. So you can look at the remaining schedules out there. But if you look at the standings, what do you think of Iowa's chances if they win out of, at this point, through another couple of weeks since we've really talked about this last, what is their chances of making the trip to Indy?
Yeah, so it's back to the drawing board where we were a week ago talking about Ohio State most likely winning that game and running the table, but that's in Oregon's play. Is there anybody on Oregon's schedule? I don't think there is. There is like no one of consequence in Oregon's schedule. I think Washington is the best team they play.
No, they play Illinois.
Okay, they play Illinois, who's got one loss.
They play Illinois,
Wisconsin.
And I wanted to say they also play at Wisconsin and at Michigan.
Okay, all right. So there's some resistance there. Okay.
So I mean, I'm not saying they're going to lose two of those, but here's my next question, because I love Friday games. Is there any chance they have a problem with Purdue this weekend on a short week?
Sure.
Short prep, traveling multiple time zones, 3 time zones.
This new Purdue quarterback must be pretty good. I haven't seen him play. He threw up 300 yards passing and 100 rushing. Ryan Brown, I believe.
What happened to what's his face?
Hudson Card got hurt. Okay. They started a true freshman, Corey. He threw for 297 and ran for 118 against Illinois.
And that's, I have not watched a ton of Illinois football this year, but that's a Brett Bielema defense. So, yeah, that's impressive. I wonder, like, on a short week, how crazy would it be, and how great would it be for Iowa fans, for Indiana fans, for Penn State fans, if Oregon loses to Purdue on Friday? That would be a great scenario. Right now, you just got to hope that all these teams rack up losses. Like, sure, anywhere they can come from. Penn State, Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon.
And people that are looking at these scenarios, the typical fan needs to reason that rid your mind of what you know of how good you think these teams are or what their national ranks are, because that has nothing to do with the Big Ten race. It doesn't matter that Oregon's number 2 in the country and that Ohio State is number 4 in the country still, because they've lost a game. There are other teams in the Big Ten that are in better position now than Ohio State, even though they're still the 4th ranked team in the country. So it's strictly about your current record in the Big Ten, who you play, and then who your direct competition is and how easy their paths are. So let's put together the best case scenario, reasonable case scenario for Iowa. Do you want, I guess you do, Oregon to run the table and just make their way to a championship game?
Why do I want that? They don't play any other contenders. I'd rather lose. I'd rather root against them every week.
Michigan only has 1 loss.
Yeah, okay, Michigan, but they play Ohio State, so one of those teams is going to have 2 losses. So, I guess if you told me that Michigan's going to beat Ohio State, then yeah, go Oregon against the Wolverines, right?
Wisconsin has 1 loss.
But Iowa's going to beat Wisconsin. They'll have 2 losses.
They would have to, yeah.
Iowa's going to beat Nebraska, who has 1 loss.
You mentioned Illinois, 1 loss.
Yeah, well, Illinois plays Oregon, and they play. Let's see here. They got a very favorable schedule, but they play Michigan this weekend, right? Is that this weekend? Yeah.
Illinois?
Michigan and Illinois this weekend.
Yes.
So there's another one. One of those teams will be eliminated after this weekend. Like assuming the Big Ten Conference Championship game is made up of 0 and 1 loss candidates, then USC's done, and that's why it would have been nice for Penn State to have lost because USC was already done. But nevertheless, either Illinois or Michigan will be done this weekend. Assuming Iowa beats Wisconsin, which they have to anyways, they'll be done. Assuming they beat Nebraska, they'll be done. And Indiana, they play at Ohio State. We assume that's a loss. They do play Nebraska. They play Michigan. I would guess there's at least 2 losses there. I know some people are predicting they go 3-3, 2-4. I don't know about that. But don't you think there's at least 2 losses there for Indiana?
Yeah. If they get through Nebraska, then it starts to get really interesting with them.
Yeah. But I mean, I could see them losing to Washington.
Sure.
I mean, I could. I'd see that
That'll
happening.
be a good game. That'll be an entertaining game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I think that if you're Iowa, you need Penn State.
yeah, that's the one that hurt. That's why I disagree with what really hurt Iowa this past weekend was USC had this 3.3 score lead, didn't they?
Yes.
You can't blow that game. Are you kidding me with a team traveling 3 time zones? So they blew that game. That's the one. That's the one Iowa needed USC to win.
Yeah, you need Penn State to lose to Ohio State and somewhere else.
And who do they? I mean, maybe at Minnesota's a challenge because Minnesota's played everybody tough, but maybe, right?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm not looking at Penn State's schedule right now, but
Oh,
I know it's pretty favorable.
yeah. Now they do play. How about this? They get a bye week and then they get at Wisconsin, so that could be interesting.
Oh yeah.
And if I'm Iowa, I'm rooting heavy for the Badgers in that one.
At Wisconsin, Ohio State, Washington at home. Yeah, at Minnesota.
Am I wrong to say what I said earlier that there are just a lot of bad teams in this conference this year? Like the top of it is very good, but there just seems to be a lot of crap. There's more teams, but there's
You
18
listed about
teams.
5 crappy teams, right? In your crappy category, you've got Rutgers, Michigan State, Northwestern is 3, UCLA, Purdue's 5. Did I miss somebody? Maryland? I don't know if
Maryland
I listed them. Maybe 6 out of 18, a third of the conference.
is crap. I mean, isn't that substantial?
According to you, they are.
Well, I didn't think Maryland and Rutgers were crap until this past weekend.
I'm not going to put Rutgers in that category quite yet after one lousy game.
Okay, so what I have right now, yeah, Maryland, Purdue, Michigan State, Northwestern, UCLA. I mean, that's 6 right there. Am I missing somebody?
I don't believe so. A few weeks ago, you may have said Minnesota.
No, I don't. No, I don't think so. I never said that. You may have said that. I have never said that. I have said they're down, but they hadn't done anything to. Who have they gotten boat raced by? All these teams that
Iowa.
I just named have been absolutely. They didn't get boat raced by Iowa.
Not boat raced, but
Some of these teams have all gotten blasted.
sure. They
All
have.
of them. I mean, UCLA got blasted at home against an Indiana team that had traveled 3 time zones. And by the way, that was the only, heading into this past weekend, that was the only win for a team traveling 3 time zones, multiple time zones. So, now correct me if I'm wrong, that was 2 time zones. That's the record heading in this past weekend was like 1-8 or 1-9.
Yes.
So that even includes teams going from like
In either direction.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So I just think there's a lot of like Penn State's schedule is very favorable. Like I have a hard time seeing them losing at home against Washington. They're not going to lose at Purdue. They're not going to lose against Maryland at home. So yeah, they probably lose to Ohio State. But hey, if Ohio State loses, if Oregon were to somehow lose a game at some point, and Ohio State loses to Penn State, then you got to start rooting for Ohio State and Penn State. I mean, because Penn State's schedule is favorable, they may end up undefeated. If they beat Ohio State, they very well could go undefeated.
You need to start running the metrics on the Ohio State, Penn State versus Iowa comparison on tiebreakers.
Right now, I need to do that.
Well, maybe after
Second
the
week of
game,
October. Uh,
after they play, and then one's going to be gone.
so let me ask you this: do you believe? And I think the answer is probably yes, because there's a lot of teams that are probably going to be vying for those spots. If you drop 2 games, are you done from Indy?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. It's hard to imagine a 2-loss team getting in. 2-loss
Yeah.
team could get into the playoff, but they're not going to get to Indy.
Between Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and Iowa, those 4 teams are such strong favorites in over the course of their schedules that for all of them to get, or a number of them to get to 2 losses.
But Iowa only needs one more. That's the difference. They took
and
that
Ohio
one
State
early.
only needs one more. Yep.
Penn State and Oregon, you got to find a couple in there. So I don't know. I guess the half glass full approach or glass half full approach this past weekend was okay. First of all, what's his face? I totally disagree with your guy Chris, who you spent on the line. You spent like 10 minutes talking to Chris during your post game show, which I couldn't understand why you would let that go on for so long. But I totally disagree when he says they were cheated out of a kick. I disagree.
No, they weren't.
It was so bang bang that
he didn't get down in time. I watched that and I went over and over and over it.
Chris was just adamant that he clearly was down in time, but we don't, like you said, we don't even know if the TV clock matched up with the game clock there in the stadium. We don't know that. The bottom line is it was a poor decision on the part of Will Howard. Yeah, Will Howard. It's a poor decision on his part. And, had he gotten down probably 1 second earlier, they probably could have gotten the timeout in. But as you brought up, great point. It also was a matter of they didn't get a first down. So the clock's only going to stop when that timeout is called. So I don't blame the officials one iota, even if he did get down slightly before the 1 sec. The coach can't call timeout before the play is over anyways. So that all takes time.
Yes. Yeah. The human reaction, and that's just part of the process. You can't say, well, you immediately call timeout. Well, nothing's immediate.
Correct.
Everything takes time. Even if the officials are completely on point and granting the timeout as soon as possible, things take time.
And it reminds me of like in college basketball. One big thing that's happened over the course of time is oftentimes at the end of a shot clock or game clock, there's a foul. And it doesn't matter when the foul occurs. What it matters on replay is when the official goes like this and puts his arm up. That's what matters. So it's sort of like with this, maybe he started the slide. Now I don't know what the rule is. You know that when a quarterback starts to slide, the ball's spotted where he started sliding.
Sure.
But the play's not over until he's actually on the ground, correct?
Well,
if it was a first down,
the shin's down, I would think the shin would be the first point of contact on the ground. If your shin's down, you're down.
But what I'm saying though, Mark, is when you begin the motion, when you start going into the slide, that's where the ball's going to get spotted, even if your shin's not on the ground. But my guess is the clock would, if you say it was a first down, clock's not going to stop until your shin hits the field.
Yeah.
But they're going to spot you back.
I'm guessing that the appearance of it is that the entire body and rear end would be on the ground. For most people watching, they think that's when the player's down. But actually, if a shin is down, just like an elbow or a forearm, you're down.
Right. So
about halfway through that slide or 2/3 through that slide, he's down. Even though he's still in the process of sliding.
Body's still moving forward. Correct.
Yeah. If I may make one point about the big picture, even though this is not exactly Iowa related, just because I kept hearing this. And I understand people gloat over elite teams losing games. That's part of the fun. Ohio State lost and people are, they're done and they looked awful and all this stuff. And so forth. Let's understand that I don't know that there are too many of us, whether it's in the media or people that evaluate the games, that predict anyone to go undefeated. It's very rare to make a prediction because there are very few times that a team goes undefeated. So, kind of the default prediction for somebody like a team like that is 11-1. That's pretty much what Ohio State does every year. They go 11-1. So, they've lost a game. And if you put in order the likelihood of which game they would lose, a trip to Oregon was clearly at the top. I did a percentage breakdown of what are the most likely Ohio State losses, just like I did with a number of other teams. Oregon was number one. If we were sitting here in July and said, Ohio State, what are they going to do? Okay, they're going to go 11-1. Who are they going to lose to? Most likely they're going to lose to Oregon. And if you knew back in July, well, they're going to lose by 1 point and they're going to have a controversial play and a offensive pass interference, which I have no issue with that being called, even though there are many times within those wide receiver defensive back conflicts that's not called. It was a correct call. I'm okay with it. That's what took them out of field goal range. A combination of that penalty and the quarterback not getting down in time. That's basically what lost them the game by 1 point on the road at Oregon. It shouldn't really change the evaluation of this team.
From a playoff perspective, no, but it is still count as a loss, just like Iowa's loss to Ohio State counts as a loss. They count the same for the conference race.
Oh, yeah, I'm not talking about the conference race. I'm just talking about people's opinion. And
Sure.
I understand, again, most people want to jump on and troll and criticize and gloat over a team losing that doesn't lose much.
Before we log off, Mark, can you address the two comments that are starred here? I want you to address these because
Okay.
And I'll address. I'm happy to comment on Joe's statement.
All right. So David asks, doesn't Iowa have to finish in the top 4 in the conference to make the playoff? Well, not technically, no. There is not a criteria. The playoff committee will select after the 4 automatic conference winners and then the group of 5. There are 5 automatic selections, and so they have 7 at large to select among everyone in college football technically. So Iowa doesn't have to finish in the top 4 in the conference, if that's what the question is really meaning. Or is this David simply asking, don't you think they have to finish in the top 4?
Well, they could finish top 3 very, very easily, finish top 3 with the schedule left and still not make the playoff. They may lose out on a tiebreaker, go to Indy, or they finish in the top 2 and lose in Indy and they won't make the playoff. They're not going to make the playoff at 10-2 with a Big Ten Indy loss. They could finish first in the conference and lose in Indy, and they're not going to make the playoff. Right?
I guess they could.
They got 1 loss.
They could be the number 1 seed, is what you're saying, in the conference championship game and lose. And
sure, they went out. If it's hard to imagine this, but say Penn State loses a couple of times, Ohio State finds 1 more loss, and Oregon loses a couple of times, Iowa's likely the 1 seed. They went out. They're the 1 seed heading to the Big Ten championship game, but they're not making the playoff at 10-3 unless they win that game.
You're right.
And then how about Joe's comment, Mark?
So then we've got Joe coming in with this one. Would rather see Penn State versus Ohio State or Oregon in the championship. Don't want to watch another blowout with Iowa in it. I want to see the best teams play for it. Love my Hawks, but not there at this time. So this is coming from an Iowa fan.
Yeah, don't you think that's I respect Joe's opinion, but I think it's an odd one because how can you say I've just never heard of a fan saying they would rather see 2 other opposing Big Ten teams in a championship game rather than your team, other than your team. That just seemed like an odd. I know you don't want to see Iowa get blown out, but I would never say, yeah, I'd rather see Ohio State and Michigan because it'll be a better game. I mean, what? What? I don't get that, but
I understand it. And this may be also perpetuated by Joe seeing the game that he saw 2 weeks ago in Columbus.
Yeah. Well,
If, if they would have played a better game, maybe he wouldn't feel like this. But I'm always of the thought you root for your team and you want them to achieve at the highest degree. And if that means risking embarrassment, so be it.
correct. Absolutely. It was absolutely like, would I rather be, well, Iowa got embarrassed in their bowl game too, but I was going to bring up Michigan State going to the CFP in 2015 and getting embarrassed by Alabama. But I'd much rather that than going to the Rose Bowl. Obviously, they got embarrassed, but even if they went to the Rose Bowl and competed, I'd rather be in the playoff. I'd rather be in the playoff. It's a huge deal. That's how I view it. I've been watching football my whole life and have been watching the playoffs since 2014, and Iowa's never made it. So that's something to strive for. I don't know why you'd ever turn that down. I know that's not what Joe's talking about. He's talking about the Big Ten championship game, but I was even talking to our guy Kyle over on my channel, and like just that experience of going to Indy last year was just awesome. And so I want to be able to have that again. Terrell Summage says, Corey, you are the only one who wants to see mediocre Iowa, all caps, get the brakes beat off of them by Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon. I'm the only one that wants to see it, Mark.
You're
I'm
an
sorry.
Iowa fan.
I just love, yeah. I'm the only
You're
one that wants to see.
also creating content for Iowa. You want them to advance as far as possible. I don't really have a rooting interest outside of my team in terms of wanting to see anybody else. I don't
Probably
think I do.
you'd like to see all the teams that you have channels for do well
Oh,
to
well,
some extent.
that. No, I'm
Either
talking
that
about,
or like you'd like to see them just completely tank.
yeah, and where the coach is on the hot seat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you can have a lot of bad things that you talk
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, 7-5 is not good. 8 and
No.
4, don't want that. But I'm
Correct.
thinking about what do I want to see in the Big Ten championship game? Who do I want to see in the Big Ten championship game? I think I'm slightly biased toward wanting to see the old guard of the Big Ten play in the Big Ten championship. I want to see the new teams have to earn their spots,
Yeah.
their stripes, I guess
Yeah,
it would
I would
be.
agree with that. I could see, I think right now, Penn State's probably a favorite to be in. It's hard to say these things because the tiebreaker scenarios where it's hard to know where those are at, but Oregon's the favorite now. And then I guess it would come, I shouldn't say Penn State because it probably comes down to the winner of Ohio State, Penn State. That's a big game.
Yeah, it's huge.
So the question is, who does Iowa root for in that one? Do they root for Ohio State to get a second loss, or do they root for Penn State to get their first loss? And then you have a couple more teams that have one loss apiece. I don't know. Tie-break scenarios, you'd have to break all those down.
If Michigan was stronger, not that they can't beat Ohio State because they have that recent history. Yeah, it'll be fascinating. As we get closer, you should delve into these. You've got a lot of videos in front of you, a lot of scenarios to break down.
Let's get past Michigan State first. But yeah, they got some momentum building now, so that's good.
Folks, if you enjoyed the audio, you can go to From the Hawkeye of the Storm as well, and you can hear this show as well as just about everything else Corey has available on From the Hawkeye of the Storm on audio. And while you're here on YouTube, of course, head on over to From the Hawkeye of the Storm.